Well, guess what? We're diving into one of the greatest mysteries of human history. What if our origins aren't what we've been taught? What if ancient texts weren't myths, but records of beings who once came from the sky? Across cultures around the world, the same stories appear again and again. The Anunnaki, advanced beings said to have influenced humanity's creation and early civilization. Joining me today is ancient astronaut researcher Jason Martell, known from Ancient Aliens and respected for his decades of research into lost civilizations, ancient technologies, and humanity's forgotten past. Tonight, we explore the Anunnaki, ancient knowledge, suppressed history, and the deeper question of why we're really here. Now stay with us, because this conversation may change everything you think you know. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios, the amazing TV personality, researcher, the one and only Jason Martell. Okay, he's back. It's been a while, but we have the legendary Jason Martell in the house. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Tony. Thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm very excited because just about a month, a little over a month, you're going to be at Conscious Life Expo, February 20th to 23rd, and we can't miss the Saturday event, February 21st, from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in the Camel Room. And one of my favorite subjects, Anunnaki. And I know you're going to bring it. You always do. And I think that's where I'm going to start. I don't want to give everything away because I want people to come and buy their tickets, and make sure you get the tickets early because I'm sure it's going to sell out. But I think a lot of people have asked me this over the years. You're like, Anunnaki, first of all, I've never heard of it. And if I've heard of it, if they're real and they are truly engineered humanity, this should be one of the biggest cover-ups or biggest secrets that humanity has ever seen. Do you agree with that? Yeah,
of course. I think that's why we stick to the guns of these topics for so long is, the underlying issue here is a pretty big question that if you have time to self-reflect on yourself or life, you usually come to the question of like, why am I here? And how did we get here? So,
right. Well, I always say people in our genre, we can blanket it under paranormal. When it comes to ghosts or UFOs, there's always something that really brought us to wanting to research it more, study it more, even giving a lifelong research to it. And this is something that it seems like it means something to you. Why is the Anunnaki, the ancient astronauts, why is it such a compelling story you want to tell?
Well, I'll kind of give the Twitter version of that since I'd like to discuss with our short time some of the more interesting, thought-provoking things around the ancient astronaut theory, where these visitors coming from, what they might be doing here. So I've gained a little bit of wisdom in these topics over the last 20 years, just pretty much wanting to ask more esoteric questions, but not really finding the answer.
Right.
For me, it started when I was in college. I was a college student in San Diego, just waiting tables, surfing, pretty normal dude. And someone had casually mentioned to me that NASA had been photographing artificial structures on Mars, specifically a face and some pyramids, very similar to what we have in Egypt. And I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. Why isn't this on the news or heard of, CNN or something? So when I looked into this just as a layman college student, it turned out that the principal subcontractor connected to NASA doing most of the imaging on the surface and in orbit was a company called Malin Space Science Systems. And it also happened to be located in San Diego, where I was going to college. So I thought, wow, amazing. So I contacted Dr. Mike Malin and said, is there any possibility that these structures in the Cydonia region are artificial? Eventually, I did get a conversation with him. I think it was via email. But his response was simply, no, these are all sand and weather erosion. There's no aliens or humans involved in creating these structures. And this made my eyebrows raise even higher in curiosity.
The Spock.
And what I did was I was able to find other peer-level review scientists that have PhDs and such in looking at satellite telemetry. And one gentleman named Mark Carlotto, who's still a colleague today, I reference his work even to today. Go, Mark. Dr. Mark Carlotto developed something called a fractal analysis to detect artificial structures in satellite telemetry. So essentially, if you're looking at satellite images of Russia, oh, look, the fractal analysis uncovered troops, tanks, all covered by tarps or shrubbery, what have you. When we ran his fractal analysis over the Cydonia region of Mars, the face and pyramids had a 98% probability hit that they're artificial.
Wow.
You know, NASA never released anything like that. Quite to the contrary, you know. So for me, it became very clear. I was like, oh my God, this is on Mars. What about all over our own planet, right? We have things all over our own planet. And so this is what led me into, well, where do we come from? And kind of on the doorstep of the Sumerian culture, we have Mesopotamia, Babylon, Sumer, that fertile strip of land between the Tigris and Euphrates, today's modern day Iraq. That was originally Sumer. And there we find essentially the origins of the Bible, right? The Bible that's in English, King James Version. There's also a Hebrew version, the Old Testament, and derivatives of that you now find in Akkadian, in Sumerian. And the difference here, they're still in stone. Literally that word, writing in stone. The key aspects of the Bible are all found in Sumerian derivatives in ancient Iraq. So to answer your question, I became overwhelmed with like, oh my God, what's happening? Because all of the references the Sumerians give, over 100 of the things needed for a modern society, you know, math and agriculture and astronomy and kingship and schools. They also had a wealth of knowledge where they interacted with their living gods. Just like the Bible said, there was once a time when man lived amongst living gods.
Gods, right.
Well, turns out that was probably the Sumerians and the Anunnaki.
I find that fascinating, and I totally agree with what you're saying, because I feel that with religion is I feel has put more of a damper on the truth than what is in plain sight with the Sumerian tablets. Yeah, I just feel like that's a control thing. I think it's where humanity has kind of been led astray. I'm not taking anything away from religion beliefs, but I just feel like the truth, the old saying, the truth shall set you free, kind of goes back to our origins. And I know when the ancient texts say that humanity was created in their image after their likeness, do you actually believe that's more a symbolic thing, or do you think that is a literal statement?
No, if we follow the chain of evidence around how we were created genetically, the mitochondrial DNA of us, meaning mitochondrial DNA is a type of DNA only passed down by females. It doesn't mutate. And so the mitochondrial DNA that looks like us pretty much shows up in southern Africa around 250,000 years ago, or somewhere in that range, 200,000 years ago, which is pretty much in alignment with, again, these Sumerian tales through the work of Zecharia Sitchin, looking at some of these texts and explaining that, you know, the Anunnaki shows up here 300,000 years ago and wants to mine gold out of southern Africa. And they quickly realized that doing it with machines and tools, let's just fashion a worker to do it in our image and after their likeness. And where does this worker that they fashion show up? In southern Africa, essentially right along the genetic code of what we have today to say, wow, that's where our lineage starts. So there's a lot of pieces like that that start to raise questions around, you know, how we were created and who were these creators.
I was thinking the other day about, I see all the time a new human species have been discovered. I'm curious on the past of the Anunnaki. When we hear at least 21 human species that scientists have confirmed, what do you contribute to this many types of different human species in the connection with the Anunnaki? I find that fascinating.
Well, I answer from a couple ways. First of all, we have a lot of shared knowledge across cultures, you know. The Anunnaki being specifically mentioned, let's say in Mesopotamia and ancient Iraq.
Right.
The same descriptions of these beings, gods who come from the sky, need to mine certain minerals and fashion or work or control the human population to do it for them. That same story is also echoed in Africa. You know, even before the ancient astronaut theorists of today, like Zecharia Sitchin, or of yesterday, theorists like Zecharia Sitchin or Eric von Daniken, who literally just passed away
I know. Ago. We lost a legend.
You know, even before their work, there was an author called Credo Mutwa out of Africa who looked at the origins of mythical tales from where do the gods come from Africa. And it turns out they come down from the sky, right? And they mirror the same descriptions of the Anunnaki. What's also trippy about that is that literally I love movies and the Marvel comics and Marvel movies. One of the latest ones, you know, Stan Lee's comics and stuff. There's the movie called The Avengers.
Oh yeah.
And this god Loki opens up a star portal and uses a force from space called the Chitauri to come invade. Well, it turns out that Credo Mutwa shows that oral traditions around Africa, they speak of these sky gods that came down. And what were they called? The Chitauri. So I was like, wait a minute. And reading some of this, preparing for Ancient Aliens, you know, one of the scripts, I was like, oh my God, look at Stan Lee. He knew that when he was talking about mythology, again, Thor, Loki, the Chitauri, he's sourcing it from actual myths and legends across continents. So yeah, the Chitauri are what they're called in Africa. They literally sound and act just the same way as the Anunnaki over in Mesopotamia.
Wow. I always say that Hollywood does depict a lot of what is going to happen in our future and or does tell history when we think it's just entertainment. But if you just kind of open your eyes and watch what's happening on screen and realize that this is truth.
There's something to it.
Yeah.
I love watching movies.
Oh, I do too.
And a lot of times, again, you start with these mythological words like a Stargate or the word Atlantis. But when you dig into it, you realize that there's more to it on just the surface. I'll give you an example. We've all heard of the term Atlantis. It's been around for ages as to does it exist? Where was it? You know, and you can trace cultures today that still reference Atlantis in some fashion, sometimes even directly. Here's an example. You know, the whole population that came to the continent of South America through, Peru, Bolivia, and kind of spidering out. A lot of that, we now see evidence of these great cultures of the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Mayans, the Aztecs, but they all came from one spot and then spidered out to different locations as they developed. And if you look at some of these cultures, I mean, I just returned from Chichen Itza about a month ago. And, when you look at some of the artwork and the architecture, but the artwork alone, the colors they use, the little glyphs and all of these things with their calendar are articulated in such a fashion, you wonder, well, how did they come up with this, right? Who taught them this? And it turns out that if you look at the Aztec culture, they'll tell you, well, we believe that our previous, ancestors came from Aztlan. Our home world is Aztlan, out in the ocean, an island, called Aztlan.
Sounds familiar.
Aztlan sounds very similar to Atlantis, Aztlan, Atlantis. So it's very possible that you see some of these, again, the brilliance of the South American cultures, the Mayans, Toltecs, Aztecs, all of those. Their central, where they came from, could have been that they were part of these people that left Atlantis and went to, various other continents. So we have to realize there's probably a much richer history to our past. And maybe some of these other cultures at the Atlantean time were not completely human. Last breath before I'll take a break for a second is one of the things that we talk about a lot on the show Ancient Aliens, where we kind of scratch our heads, is, there's 88 known constellations or points in the sky of interest. 88. Why is it that all cultures seem to only reference over and over 3? Pleiades, Orion, and Sirius. Pleiades, Orion, and Sirius. Over and over, out of all the known spots in the sky, they, like as a rhetoric, say, these are the places where the gods came from.
That is, wow, out of 88, only 3. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's other places that have been that maybe they're cited, but we hear that over and over in the artwork and in the alignments that are created. Like Giza is a mirror image of Orion at 10,500 BC. They literally line up as a terrestrial, alignment, and the Sphinx is gazing right into the constellation of Leo. But that only happens at 10,500 BC. So, who would do that and why? Why alignments with Orion, So it raises a lot of questions.
No, it's a lot of questions, and that's going to really kind of blend in with this question about technology. The Sumerian tablets, they're thousands of years old, but yet they describe beings from the sky with technology that sounds very modern. And so I'm curious, even Atlantis, they talk about the advancement of their technology. Why do you feel that technology was lost? Was it to cover up this previous history of our world, or why do you feel that technology was lost? Because I feel like it's even more advanced than what we had today.
I definitely think it's already been rediscovered and it's classified. I'm going to answer that from two angles. One is through a 5,000-year-old script called the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I'll come back to that.
I remember that.
Remind me if I forget somehow. But point one is, the reason why we don't hear about a lot of this technology that most likely is being suppressed is this. All of the UAP and UFO activity that we hear of today, I, as a ufologist, am like, man, where's that craft? How can I get my hands on it or see it and fly it? Because I want to feel the acceleration or non-acceleration or whatever it is, right? I'm interested in the tech. I want to leave the atmosphere and come back safely. It turns out that the people, most likely, the powers in control of this technology who have been reverse engineering craft and have recovered actual ones or shot them down, that's not their goal or purpose. If you change your mindset and put on this hat to say, I have a military use to say, I now have a deployment system to take nuclear weapons and deploy them within seconds anywhere on the planet.
Wow. Yeah.
That's going to make it a classified topic, right?
Yeah.
If you have a deployment system that can take a payload and deploy it anywhere on the planet within seconds, which they've probably already done in places like, wherever there's wars going on, and we've seen some other footage that, big triangle shows up and and everyone's like, damn, what happened? It's very possible that they're never going to release technology supporting the ability to do instant nuclear weapon, deployments across the world. So that's probably why it's classified, because they look at it differently than we do. Point two, going back to the ancient times, is there's all kinds of descriptions across all cultures of them witnessing the technology for us to leave the heavens. Even again, you have the Bible and other sacred texts talking about the Tower of Babel, to reach the heavens. They built these towers to try and reach the heavens, So in the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have this hero called Gilgamesh, and this is recorded in a Sumerian script, 5,000 years old, and it talks about Gilgamesh going to this place, which is Lebanon, and witnessing the ascension and descension of the craft of the gods. Thunderous sounds, fire and smoke, and you're like, well, that sounds like a rocket, And the place he described it as the landing place. We now know that that's Baalbek in Lebanon. That initial platform has trilithoton-sized stones. Some of the stones weigh, 3,000 or 4,000 tons, or larger. And they're stacked at the third and fourth level up. So it's like, we have no idea how that was done, and even though at the top you see Greek and Roman, the Greeks venerated Zeus and then Jupiter,
right?
Then we had the Romans worshiping Jupiter. That's why you see all the columns. But the base they always said everything was built by and referenced Sumerians, and that they worshipped a god called Baal. So the whole Epic of Gilgamesh, seeing like smoke and fire and it sounds like rocket ships, again equates to the fact that it's misunderstood technology. Maybe they're using propellants that are not what we use today, but we see a lot of crossover in similar technology to what we have as legacy craft, and even our new emerging ones that are nuclear powered or anti-gravitic, spidered throughout history, the same references, right? Ezekiel, wheel within wheel, and all these types of things. So
that, yeah, and I mean, we've talked many times with other people about the technology of the Great Pyramid, because it was there way before many think the Great Flood. And I'm curious if that was, the Great Flood was one of those to rewrite the history of humanity, to kind of cleanse the planet of past history. What is your thoughts on that?
I definitely believe that there's cyclical events, and those cyclical events have highs and lows. Mm-hmm. Over 30 ancient cultures tracked something called precession of the equinox. And, it's this larger 24,000 year cycle of time. You're like, why would they be tracking that?
Right.
Well, it turns out many of these ancient cultures use the heavens as a grand celestial clock. And they could tell you, looking at the constellations, these 12 constellations, are we going to an age of the golden age, or are we going into an age of the dark ages? And you've always heard these terms, the golden age, the dark ages. It's not a linear cycle. We're just coming out of the last dark age, essentially. But it turns out in the past, there's been golden ages. Many ancient cultures, again, speak of this. And that even ancient Vedic texts say that when we're in the golden age, that man has the ability to interpret God. We're nowhere near that right now. No. But it turns out, though, that a lot of these cyclical events, when they're in the golden age, there's crossover with cataclysm, meaning the last time looking at our calendar that we were in a golden age was probably around 10 to 13,000 years ago.
Wow.
Which also coincides potentially with some type of last cataclysm that we had. So there's definitely a cycle to what's going on Earth, where we seem to go into a dark age and forget everything, whether that's from natural disasters or other causes. And then we ascend into a golden age, where we have these unbelievable chances to, align with the universe and probably other species, And time is, if you think about some of these concepts of, let's say, the Anunnaki, and pair it over with, again, respectfully using the term Jesus. Let's say Jesus was an Anunnaki, and he was here when he was 21, and then they take his life, or he leaves and he says, I'll be back. And he leaves and goes back onto his planet Nibiru, which is traveling around our sun every 3,600 years, whereas on Earth, one orbital loop is 365 days. A solar year is a solar year. It's a loop around the sun. For us, it's 365 days. So if Jesus was 21, left, went back to Nibiru for just 1 year, and came back when he was 22, it's been 3,600 years on Earth.
Wow.
So the whole idea of go live in heaven or have this long extended life. Yes, it's possible that others have probably been taken for maybe a short time even to visit something like another planet like Nibiru or what have you. But when you come back, the time and space has changed in such that, you might have a longer lifespan or have lived much longer than others. And that, again, there's a lot of these modern concepts that are coming out of the ufology specials, the disclosure special, the Age of Disclosure. Wonderful.
Right.
But very scientific and very academic around, well, yes, there's anti-gravitic craft, and they have this bubble that protects them, and it might look small, but when you get inside, it's the side of a football stadium because you're now in a new dimensional space. The concepts are getting a little bit wow, we're starting to learn things, and maybe eventually there will be actual contact, but I don't think it's going to come through government, like a government disclosure of some sort.
Yeah, even if the government did some type of disclosure, we still don't know the full effects of it. And that's why I feel with from the religious to the government, the mainstream, history has intentionally been avoided with the Anunnaki narrative. And I'm curious if it's more out of fear of rewriting everything we knew. I feel like, when the parents don't want to let you know about their teenage years and college years because, they don't want to seem like they're not good parents or they were bad kids growing up. But because it would rewrite history about the children thinking of their parents. Do you feel like this is also what the narrative of disclosure of the Anunnaki?
I'm going to answer that from two questions, and much broader than just the question of the Anunnaki. If you go into the past, heresy for esoteric knowledge has always been handled by the religion as just that.
Yeah.
Snuff it out, right? When you had the conquistadors show up on the shores of the Mayans and giving them all of their gold and all of their codices and sharing everything they have, the priests looked at all that stuff, looked at all the astronomy, and were like, wow, this is way, way more knowledgeable and advanced than what we have. Let's burn it all quickly and convert them to Christianity as quickly as we can. Not good, right?
Yeah.
So we've seen this in ancient times that, across cultures, the religion fears the truth and the knowledge and tries to suppress it. Modern times, it's the same thing that's been happening, unfortunately. I was raised as a Christian, but I'm not a Christian. I respect many different religions, right? Mm-hmm. And if you watch The Age of Disclosure and listen to some of the people interviewed in there, you hear Jay Stratton, who, ran the ATIP program and was in charge of Travis Taylor, who was the chief scientist of ATIP, who was a cast member of Ancient Aliens, you know what I mean? And he's part of our team, right? So we have inside and connected information now to these UFO task force, right? And they tell you this, but you're like, well, how is this even possible? The latest UFO specials, you hear these people being interviewed. Well, I ran ATIP, Lou Elizondo, people like that. I have a trained military background. I had inside access. We'd be walking through the Pentagon and someone would whisper in my ear, stop messing with the demons. Stop calling the demons.
In the Pentagon?
In the Pentagon.
Really?
Or they're talking to a deep, classified debriefing of your airspace is being penetrated by UAPs. And there's things that we think you should be worried about. And they're like, we don't want to talk about this because all you're doing is bringing up demons. And they're like, dude, I'm telling you that your airspace is being penetrated by an unknown force, and you're worried that it's demons and that you don't want to talk about it. So my point is this. Yeah. Even under the current umbrella of what's happening, there's something that they now refer to in the special, which I love, as the legacy program. And that's what I grew up with. The legacy program cover-up doesn't let people talk about this stuff, doesn't let people go public with these things, doesn't want the public to know. That has slightly now new ramifications with the current people trying to crack this egg open, and all of the people still having the really deep classified stuff. They're part of the legacy program, and they won't let go, and they won't say anything, and they won't give anyone access. Why? Because of the religious fear that you're mentioning right now. Yeah, so that's a problem.
Well, I mean, it all comes, again, it comes down to power and money. And, when religion first started, it was all about more power than it was the money part. Now it's more the money, because money does buy power in our day and age. But,
yeah.
I want to talk about some artifacts, because like myself, I'm lucky where I'm now starting to be able to travel to some of these locations that it's taken me 50 some years to go to. I'm going to Machu Picchu in June.
Nice.
And so I've interviewed many people over the years but I've never got to experience it myself. When I go to these locations, and I look at these structures, let's say the pyramids, Baalbek, Machu Picchu, what do people look for? Because we look and go, oh, that's amazing. How did they do that? But that's kind of where it ends. We don't really think about it. We don't really put thought into the ability of these people to, if you didn't see it, it's quotes, people to create these structures. What was one of the most amazing artifacts or structures that you experienced that you were like, there is no hell of a way humans created this structure at all?
Well, the answer itself is interesting because, first of all, there's many different references to something that's known as Cyclopean architecture. That's literally the academic term. Cyclopean, that means a large one-eyed person.
Right.
Giants, right?
Right.
So Cyclopean architecture is something we see at lots of different sites like Ollantaytambo, Teotihuacan, Pumapunku, Sacsayhuaman. A lot of these sites, Machu Picchu, a lot of these sites have large blocks of stone. Some of them granite, diorite, very, very hard stones, on the Mohs scale of density. Right. We're talking about very dense rock that have somehow been molded like putty to fit together in such a way where there's no use of mortar or filament. You can't even slide a dollar bill between these stones.
That's amazing.
So with that, you also see something called vitrification, which is high heat applied to a molten-like surface where someone took like a straight edge and cut a line or flattened it, and then it hardens almost kind of like glass would, but this is molten rock.
That's pretty amazing.
So between the Cyclopean architecture and this vitrification evidence you see across all those sites, probably the number one head scratcher is Pumapunku. And my good colleague Giorgio, we talked about and show that a lot. He visited Pumapunku many times and jokingly, tells in our show, like, if you ever visit Pumapunku, make sure you tell him Giorgio sent you, because, these sites are all kind of connected up there. If you go to Pumapunku, Teotihuacan and such, or Tiwanaku, is right nearby it. A lot of those sites, again, you have to wonder how they were able to cut the stones in such a way. And it almost looks like a lot of these sites, Pumapunku, were fashioned for some kind of technological purpose.
That's pretty. I can't wait to go. I just can't. I went down to Cancun and visited a lot of the ruins down there. So, and it was
Playa del Mar and stuff.
Yeah, it's so fascinating.
Playa del Carmen.
You're right. And it is so fascinating. And I think a lot of people though think about, well, if there's Anunnaki, then why us? Why us, Jason? I mean, out of the entire universe and galaxies, why would these advanced beings choose us, Earth?
There's a lot of reasons that we could guess, you know what I mean? That maybe we have a connection to them, or it's our minerals here on Earth and that's what brought them, Another thing that I like to explore, which I don't know the answer, is a lot of the gods that are referenced seem to have some connection with water. They come from the ocean. They live in the oceans. You've got the Dogon tribe in Africa talking about their gods coming out of the water. We've got the Nomo out of Japan that look like they're wearing these ancient like diving suits. Mm-hmm. We got Enki of the Sumerians, looks like a fish god again coming out of the water. Just many different references of gods coming out of the water. And I wonder if you think about the vastness of dimensional travel and space travel, especially going through space, different temperatures and such. Well, if you come from a watery planet, or if you live within water, and have a base and create biospheres in water, water's got only such a variance in temperature. It's either going to evaporate or freeze.
Right.
Right? You're not looking at a huge range in temperature difference. Why not target other worlds with water,
right,
and be able to transfer your civilization between those types of planets? So it may very well be that because we are such a watery planet, that we are a perfect, companion for exploration. And even as of now, we know that there are hot spots around the planet. And a lot of those seem to be, areas like the Devil's Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, right off the coast here in California, with the Chumash Indians and the Channel Islands, stuff popping in and out of the water.
Yeah.
They even record that stuff happening today, so it's very possible that, again, we don't fully understand that maybe the beings that are here, we think are visitors, they've just been hiding in the oceans for a very long time, and they could literally claim it as their planet as well.
Do you feel that the Anunnaki was colonizers versus now we feel like the Greys and the humanoids and all these are more caretakers?
Caretakers, that's an interesting term. I do believe that, a lot of the abductions you see are a multivariant of the Greys, an insect like praying mantis, and then these Nordic type that you could classify as an Anunnaki. They don't really have wings and beaks.
Right.
But it's very possible, that abductions and things like that are usually done with more of a systematic approach around like a medical checkup or reproductive systems. I have good friends, that are abductees and are connected to that space, Whitley Strieber, Steve Neal, and many others. And it's interesting how they view the abduction scenarios today as less physical and more mental projection and such. So I don't know. I would say that the Greys to me are some type of worker caretaker. They could have been a genetic offshoot, just like we were as a worker race to help the Anunnaki, but more as medical experimentation and flying their craft. In the Sumerian records, there's a reference to Igigi, I-G-I-G, and these little beings, they look like Greys. They look like little androids. And you have to wonder that they're literally being described as helpers of the gods, doing like medical checkups, flying their craft, stuff like that. So pretty much sounds like the Greys to me.
It does. Well, I know we're getting close to the end here, but I do want to ask if you think the Anunnaki, they were here once. Do you believe they'll return again? It's been a long time, but maybe in their world, it hasn't been. And if they do you think humanity is ready? Mentally, spiritually, socially?
Probably not at this exact moment. I feel like we're being pushed in a very gentle way to make changes to be able to, let's say, join the Galactic Federation.
Right.
But I don't know that we're having interactions with them on a public basis for a reason, or why that's happening, other than, I would say that all the ancient gods from Quetzalcoatl to, Enki and some of these others that actually wanted to help humanity, if they do come back and all they see is a bunch of space weapon big guns pointed at them,
right?
That's not the message I want to send.
Yeah, I
don't think others would want to send. So I think there will be a challenge at some point in our future if the ancient people do reunite with their gods in some fashion. They're going to need to break through that barrier of military-controlled space that we have now, which probably they can.
Right.
But that raises a whole other question about the wars in heaven and what's really going on up there, which we're not a part of or don't understand.
What's holding us back from being a part to joining that Galactic Federation?
It could just be time. As I said earlier, it could just be the natural evolution that we go through, where we reach a point where it's like, wow, the humans have evolved again to a state where now they're actually interesting to talk to, but then they ascend back into the dark ages and it's like, oh, wait, give them another 6 months for us, which is, 12,000 of their years. And then it's fine again, but right now it's kind of like a quiet time, they're on time out.
Or like chocolate chip cookies. They're just not quite done yet.
They're just not quite done yet.
Well, I know, we've talked a lot about the Anunnaki ancient astronauts, but coming up at the Conscious Life Expo, I'm sure you're going to go in even deeper. What do you hope people, when they come see you on the 21st, that they take away from your presentation?
Well, the aid of technology today is helping us crack the egg of the paranormal in the past, right? So I'm a big advocate of using AI in the business world as well as a tool. And if you look at some of the ancient texts and things that AI is helping us decipher, like the ancient Sumerian kings list, for many years it said, lords who were appointed by the smudge, can't read it. And AI was able to take that out and translate it. Lords appointed by those who came down from the sky.
Wow.
Yeah. It was like, okay, thank you. There's confirmation. So a lot of that type of stuff, again, AI is helping us crack the academic views of the ancient astronaut theory to not be so biased and accept more as truth rather than mythology.
AI doesn't have judgment, so I think it could be a very helpful tool for what we're looking for. So
I hope so.
But Jason, thank you. You're great. I have loved seeing you excel, in this research, and I wish you luck, and I can't wait to see you at Conscious Life Expo.
Yes, sir. See you soon.
See you soon. And thank you, everybody, for being part of Truth Be Told. Again, every Friday, we hope that you tune in and share your thoughts and share this show. Like, subscribe. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.